Now, joining this time from Washington, D.C. to talk about the Ebola breakout and politics and race as part of that issue is Bishop Council Nedd. He's a founding member of Project 21, joins us from a Washington, D.C. studio. Bishop Council Nedd, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, so we've been hitting this subject a few times the last week or so.
Yes.
The Ebola patient's family members are blaming racism for his death. It's you know, on the one hand, I don't want to put too much blame on the family. They're grieving. They're going through an emotional time. I put the blame on the likes of Jesse Jackson, who have exploited the family's grief.
I think you're right about that. You know, the question is, you know, would they be crying racism if Jesse Jackson hadn't put the idea in their head? You know, Mr. Duncan, you know, his death is regrettable, obviously, but he got the best medical treatment in the world. He got the best medical treatment that was available to him. And for Jesse Jackson to come after the fact and say, well, he died essentially because of racism. No, Mr. Duncan died from Ebola. Like I said, he got the best medical treatment in the world. And for Jesse Jackson to go down there after the fact and basically criticize the hospital, the staff, all the medical workers who, you know, sweated over this guy, and actually now some have contracted Ebola.
That's right.
And to say that they didn't do their best, you know, it's ridiculous, and it's absurd, and it's hurtful.
It's hurtful. And let's not forget, Mr. Duncan lied at the airport when he came to America, and he didn't fully disclose all his symptoms to the hospital personnel when he first went in complaining of ailments.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that have happened at various steps in this process where something should have happened. You know, if we look at the Ebola crisis, the way it sort of unfolded, you know, several weeks ago, Japan said, you know, we're not going to allow any flights into our country from Nigeria because we don't want to get Ebola. You know, the U.S. could have done something similar a while ago to prevent this probably from even happening in the first place. But I think it goes to the bigger issue of the fact that President Obama not remotely concerned about protecting the security of the country, whether it's people flooding across the border or whether it's diseases trickling in through people who come in through these airports unchecked.
Yeah, he's putting politics ahead of this. I mean, he's not concerned about the security of the country, as you point out. I don't believe it's because he's an evil man who's cold and callous, doesn't care. I believe he's a man who's driven by politics and ambition, and that's what this demonstrates.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right about that. You know, when I lived in the United Arab Emirates in 2011, you know, if you're going to the United Arab Emirates from the U.S., you know, you can essentially just go through the customs. But if you're coming from certain countries, there is a different process you have to go through. There were a bunch of Chinese laborers, you know, they need to get medical screenings. They stay in a quarantined area until they can prove that they're medically clean, and then they get released into the country to do whatever it is they're doing. You know, this is a healthcare crisis. This is a potential healthcare catastrophe epidemic with horrible consequences, not just for Libya and Nigeria, but potentially for the United States, as we see. And, you know, we need to take extreme measures to protect the security of the country.
Final question, Bishop Council Nedd. Over something like 96% of those African Americans who voted in 2008 and 2012 voted for President Barack Obama. Do you believe that this message of racism and Ebola will resonate within the African American community? I ask that question again because in overwhelming numbers, in almost exclusive numbers, they've supported the narrative of the left. I'm not saying the White House is calling it racism, but Jesse Jackson supports the narrative of the White House and vice versa.
Well, yeah, so President Obama, I think, has dug a hole for himself. As you said, you know, he's probably the worst president ever. That we've ever seen. He's dug this hole for himself, and I think he's desperate right now. He wants to preserve his legacy, and he doesn't want, you know, Congress to be completely lost to the Democrats. So I think he's desperate at this point. And so if the Jesse Jackson race narrative works in this instance, well then, you know, President Obama's fine with it if he thinks it's going to help him in the polls, help his legacy. But the fact is that President Obama's created a tinderbox. you know, we've got the situation going on in Ferguson, which hasn't seemed to die down, and the president and Eric Holder haven't done anything to sort of help that situation. And now we've got the situation arising in Texas with Jesse Jackson again going down there trying to instigate things, and President Obama and people just sitting back and saying, well, you know, that's fine. Yeah, it's a horrible situation that Obama has created.
All right, listen, Bishop Council Nedd, we thank you for joining us and weighing in with your insight and perspective. Up next.